The red sun of Coral 4 slowly rose above the rocky hills, painting the sky with orange and yellow streaks. The ground beneath the human engineer, Eli, was dry and cracked, but he bent down and touched it like an old friend. He wasn't interested in how the planet looked. He was thinking about how it moved, how it broke. The planet had one big problem: earthquakes, big ones, strong enough to destroy even the best-built structures. That's why a team of elite engineers from across the galaxy had come to Coral 4. Their mission was to build shelters that could survive the constant shaking. Eli was the only human on the team. The others were from species with advanced tools, shining tech and perfect uniforms. Their machines could float, scan, and build with lasers. Eli's tools looked like something from an old Earth museum: ropes, wood sticks, handmade cloth, a small shovel, and bundles of dried plant fiber he had brought with him. The Varkon engineers, tall lizard-like beings with glowing blue eyes, led the mission. They were proud of their skills and even more proud of their machines. The Varkon leader, Trevax, didn't hide his dislike for Eli's methods. "What is this?" Trevax asked, pointing at the pile of mud Eli had started mixing. "Is he making food for worms?" The others laughed. Some aliens had never even seen mud before. "No," Eli replied calmly, not looking up. "I'm making a shelter." "With dirt?" Trevax raised his head and hissed. "You insult the mission." Eli didn't argue. He just kept working. On Earth, he had built homes in places where earthquakes struck often. His people had learned how to build strong shelters using natural materials: mud bricks, woven fibers, and flexible support frames. No machines. Just skill, patience, and knowledge passed down through generations. But the aliens didn't care about old knowledge. They only cared about new technology. "Let the human play with dirt," one of the Kidari engineers said, flying by with jet-powered boots. "When the real work begins, we'll show him how real builders do it." Eli smiled to himself. He had heard this before back on Earth too. He chose a flat area far from the main construction zone and began building. First, he mixed mud with fibers, making a thick, sticky paste. Then he shaped it into blocks and let them dry in the sun. Each brick took time. He built slow but steady. Next, he made a light wooden frame, flexible enough to move with the ground when the earth shook. Then he added the dried bricks, stacking them carefully, using natural resin and more mud as a kind of glue. Over the top, he placed a curved roof of layered mats, tied tightly with vines. The others used metal frames and crystal panels. Their machines shaped entire walls in seconds. Their shelters looked sleek, tall, and impressive. Eli's looked simple, small, round and rough. By the end of the first week, most of the alien shelters stood tall and shining. Eli's dome sat in the distance like a little clay hill. The alien engineers gathered near his shelter and laughed again. "Does it even have power?" asked a Doran tech, adjusting her glowing visor. "No," Eli said, "but it won't fall when the ground shakes." "You'll be the first to run when the quake comes," Trevax added. "If your little hut doesn't bury you first." Eli didn't reply. He only looked at the sky. The red sun was moving lower. The ground under his feet felt different. He had learned to feel small tremors before big ones. Coral 4 had been quiet for days. Too quiet. That night, the engineers returned to their bright shelters. Walls glowed with soft light. Doors opened, with a hum. Eli sat inside his dark dome, his hands covered in dried mud. He lit a small earth-made lantern and checked each beam and tie. He trusted the design. It was simple but tested by time. The quake came without warning. It started as a low hum, then grew into a deep rumble. The ground shook violently. The alien shelters flashed red with warning lights. Inside, engineers screamed as beams cracked and walls bent. One tall tower made by the Kidari leaned sideways. A support beam snapped. The whole upper floor crumbled, sparking and smoking. In the middle of the shaking, Eli's shelter didn't fall. It swayed. It creaked. Dust fell from the ceiling, but the dome held. When the shaking finally stopped, the alien camp was a mess. Half the shelters had collapsed or suffered heavy damage. Equipment was scattered. Power lines were broken. Trevax crawled out of his shelter, holding his arm. Systems are down. Energy grid is broken. Other engineers checked their scanners. Nothing worked. Panic spread fast. Then someone pointed toward Eli's shelter. The small dome still stood, completely untouched. A faint lantern glow flickered inside. Eli stepped out, calm and steady. His clothes were dirty and his hands were cracked, but he was unharmed. Trevax stared at him in silence. Eli spoke softly. "I told you, it doesn't need power to survive a quake." No one laughed this time. A few alien engineers began walking toward him. One of them, a young, thin Sarnet named Telly, asked, "How did it stay up?" Eli looked back at his shelter. "It's made to move with the Earth, not fight it. That's how Earth homes were built before machines did everything. We learned from the land." Trevax didn't say anything. He simply walked back to what was left of his shelter and sat down quietly. Eli returned to his dome and sat near the lantern. Outside, the aliens began whispering. Some pointed at his tools, others at his bricks. For the first time, no one was laughing. The morning after the quake was quiet but not peaceful. Smoke rose from broken towers. Loose panels of crystal and metal lay scattered across the ground. Shiny alien shelters that had looked strong just one day ago were now cracked or crushed. The engineers walked slowly among the ruins, their faces full of shock and silence. Their tools had stopped working. Their systems were offline. Drones lay broken in the dirt. Only one shelter still stood tall and strong. Eli's mud and fiber dome. Trevax, the Varkon leader, stood with arms folded, watching Eli from a distance. His arm was wrapped in a bandage, and his pride hurt more than the injury. He still couldn't believe that the shelter built with dirt, sticks, and rope had survived better than the ones made with high-tech machines. Eli was already busy. He walked around his shelter, checking the joints and corners. He touched the mud walls with care, then nodded in satisfaction. His shelter had done what it was meant to do. Bend, not break. Telly, the young Sarnet engineer who had asked questions, the night before walked over. Her long fingers carried a notebook filled with sketches and notes. "Your shelter didn't even crack," she said. "How?" Eli looked at her and smiled kindly. "Because it wasn't built to resist the quake, with force. It was built to work with it." Telly tilted her head. "I don't understand." Eli took a stick and began drawing on the dusty ground. "Look, most of your buildings are stiff, tall, heavy, and made from hard materials. When the earth moves, the building fights it so it cracks or falls." He drew another simple shape. "But if you build something small, round, and flexible, it can move with the ground. It bends instead of breaking." Telly stared at the drawing, then looked at the fallen tower nearby. "So you planned for the quake?" Eli nodded. "Always. On Earth, we build like this in places with strong earthquakes. We've been doing it for thousands of years." More engineers began gathering around. Some still looked doubtful, but others listened closely. Their own shelters had failed. Their tools weren't helping. They needed answers. Trevax finally stepped forward. "You're saying our technology failed because we didn't build with the land?" Eli didn't answer with pride or anger. He simply said, "You forgot something important. The ground doesn't care how advanced your tools are." There was silence for a moment. Then Trevax asked, "Can you teach us?" Eli looked at the broken camp. Engineers were trying to restart power systems, but nothing worked. The supply ship wouldn't arrive for another 2 weeks. Another big quake could hit any time. He nodded. "Yes, but you'll have to get your hands dirty." That day, everything changed. The alien engineers, who were once proud and clean, now stood next to Eli with mud on their hands. Eli showed them how to mix the soil with fibers from local plants. He taught them how to form bricks, let them dry, and build frames that were not too stiff. Some engineers struggled. They were used to machines doing all the work. Their hands were not strong. Their patience was thin. Trevax, the proud leader, found it hardest of all. He had never worked without a laser or scanner. But Eli didn't laugh. He showed him how to tie vines into ropes and how to pack mud around a wooden frame. Trevax fell once while trying to set a beam. Eli helped him up. It's okay. We all fall when we try something new. The Varkon leader looked surprised. He had expected judgment. Instead, he found respect. Soon teams of aliens were building new shelters, the Earthway. The shelters were smaller, rounder, and simpler, but they began to dot the landscape like small hills of hope. Telly asked Eli many questions. Why do you use domes instead of square shapes? Because domes spread the stress evenly, he explained. And the shape is stronger when the ground shakes from all directions. She smiled. Your people are clever. Eli chuckled. No, just experienced. We made a lot of mistakes before we learned. That evening, another small tremor hit. The new shelters shook gently but didn't break. A few aliens gasped in surprise, one even clapped. The mood changed. Where there had been doubt, now there was trust. Some engineers went back to their broken machines. They didn't try to restart them. Instead, they began pulling out parts they could use to combine with Eli's methods. One group used crystal panels as lightweight walls within a mud brick frame. Another used energy shields to dry bricks faster under sunlight. Eli watched quietly as the aliens began mixing old and new. It made him happy. Not because they were copying him, but because they were learning to work with nature, not against it. Later, as the red sun set, Trivak sat beside Eli, both of them tired but content. We thought your tools were weak, Trivak said, but maybe we were blind. Eli looked at the sky. Your tools are strong, but strength without wisdom doesn't last. Trivak nodded slowly. You saved us. Eli shook his head. No, the earth saved you. I just listened to it. For the first time, Trivak smiled. That night, the camp was quiet again. But this time it was the peace of understanding, not the silence of shock. Shelters stood all around, shaped like domes, made from mud and fiber, lit by soft lights from mixed alien tools. A new style of building had been born, simple, strong, and united. And at the center of it all, the little dome built by one human stood as a reminder that sometimes old ways hold the strongest truth. Days passed on Corel 4, and the alien engineers worked harder than ever before. Their once proud machines remained silent, forcing them to rely on their hands and old-fashioned skills. Eli's mud and fiber shelter was no longer a joke. It was the key to survival. The aliens gathered every morning near Eli's dome, watching him work with focus and care. Eli never boasted. He simply showed them the way, teaching patiently step by step. The Varkon leader, Trivak, stood quietly at the edge of the group, still trying to accept that the human was now their best teacher. He could not forget how he had laughed before. But now he watched Eli with respect. Eli started by showing the aliens how to prepare the soil. Not every dirt is good, he said. You need mud with clay and some sand. Too much sand makes it weak. Too much clay makes it crack. He walked to the nearby riverbed and picked up handfuls of earth. The aliens looked closely. Their world was different from Earth, but the soil had similar qualities. Next, Eli said, you need fibers, long, strong fibers from plants or trees. On Earth, we use straw or grass. Here, we use these long leaves. He handed out bundles of dried leaves from the local plants. The aliens stared at the fibers. They had never thought plants could be part of a building. Eli smiled. Fiber holds the mud together like glue. It stops cracks from spreading. Slowly, the aliens began mixing the mud and fibers with their hands. Some made mistakes. They added too much water or packed the mixture too tight. Eli corrected them gently. Mud must be soft but sticky, like thick paste, not too wet. While the aliens worked, Eli told stories from Earth. He spoke of ancient builders who made homes that lasted for centuries. He explained how humans learned from nature, how the wind, rain, and earth shaped their designs. One curious Sarnet engineer asked, why did your people stop building this way? Why did you move to machines? Eli thought for a moment. Because machines are faster and easier. We forgot how to listen to the land. But when machines fail, you must remember the old ways. Trivak grunted in agreement. He tried his hand. at shaping mud bricks, his large claws clumsy but determined. Eli showed the aliens how to form bricks by hand, pressing the mud fiber mixture into wooden molds. Then they placed the bricks carefully to dry in the sun. As the days passed, the alien engineers built more and more bricks. Their hands grew stronger and more skilled. They worked side by side with Eli, learning to appreciate the simple tools they once mocked. One afternoon, Eli demonstrated how to build a flexible frame for the shelter. He used light wood and tied the pieces together with vines. "Your frames are too stiff," Eli said, pointing to the broken metal beams. "You want something that can bend, not break." The aliens watched as he built a dome-shaped frame, careful, to leave spaces that would allow movement. Telly, the young Sarnet engineer, smiled. "Your frame looks like a skeleton," Eli laughed softly. "It is, but a living skeleton, one that moves with the earth." The aliens helped Eli cover the frame with dried bricks and mud plaster. They tied mats over the top for the roof, ceiling, gaps with more fiber. Eli's dome had become a classroom, a place where the alien engineers learned not just to build, but to respect Earth's ancient knowledge. Some aliens still doubted. They whispered that Eli's methods were slow and outdated, but others began to see the strength in simplicity. One night, after a small tremor shook the ground, the aliens gathered around the dome again. None of the new shelters had fallen. A Varkon engineer said quietly, "Maybe the human was right." Eli nodded. "Sometimes the oldest tools are the strongest." Trivak stood beside him and said, "We judged too quickly. Now, we see the truth." From that day on, Eli became more than a builder. He became a teacher, a bridge between worlds. The alien engineers no longer laughed at the human tools. They held the mud bricks and fibers with respect. They worked with hands and hearts, learning from the past to protect their future. And on Coral 4, the shelters grew stronger, standing tall against the shaking earth. Proof that even in a galaxy of advanced tech, simple wisdom could save lives. Weeks passed, and the new shelters dotted the camp like small hills. Mud and fiber, shaped by alien hands and guided by Eli's simple wisdom, had become the foundation of their safety. The engineers had almost forgotten how to trust machines. They now trusted the earth beneath their feet and the shelter that bent with it. But Coral 4 was an unforgiving world. Just when the aliens began to relax, nature prepared another test. One evening, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. A fierce storm rolled in with thunder, lightning, and strong winds. The wind howled through the valley, shaking the fragile shelters. Trivak stood at the entrance of his new dome-shaped home, eyes narrowed against the driving rain. Beside him, Eli checked the mud walls, running his hands over the thick plaster. "Will it hold?" asked Telly, her voice full of concern. Eli nodded. "It must. These shelters were built to face wind and rain as well as shaking earth. The storm battered the camp through the night. Rain poured in heavy sheets. Lightning flashed, casting eerie shadows on the domes. Winds threatened to rip mats from their roofs. Inside Eli's shelter, warmth and safety sheltered the engineers. Outside, some older alien shelters groaned under the storm's fury, leaking and cracking. By dawn, the storm passed. The camp was wet, muddy but still standing. The aliens emerged slowly from their shelters, eyes wide with relief. Many of their old, high-tech homes had suffered leaks or damage. But the mud and fiber shelters, strong and flexible, had stood firm. Trivak looked over the camp, then back at Eli's dome. "Your shelter is proof, not just against quakes, but storms too." Eli smiled softly. "Nature is many things. We must build to survive all its moods." The engineers worked quickly to repair the smaller damages, but hope grew in their hearts. They began to see the human way as a true path forward. Days later, the true test arrived. The ground shook with a force greater than before. An earthquake rumbled beneath Coral 4, tearing open cracks and sending rocks tumbling. The aliens scrambled to safety, but many feared their shelters would collapse. Inside Eli's dome, the walls wobbled, but did not crack. The flexible frame absorbed the shocks. The mud bricks held firm. Outside, the earth roared and shook. Alien shelters made of stiff metals bent and broke. Machines sputtered and died. Trevax grabbed Eli's arm as the quake shook the ground. "We were wrong. Your simple ways are the future." When the shaking stopped, the camp was quiet except for the breathing of survivors. Slowly, the aliens emerged, eyes shining with a mix of awe and gratitude. Telly touched the mud wall of Eli's shelter. "This saved us." Eli looked around at the faces. "Not me. The Earth. We just learned how to listen." That day, a new respect grew between human and alien. The engineers no longer saw Eli as just a human with strange tools. They saw him as a teacher, a friend who had helped them survive. Trevax stood tall, proud and changed. "We will rebuild everything using what you have taught us." Eli nodded. "And you will teach others. This knowledge is for all." The alien engineers began planning new shelters, stronger and wiser. They mixed technology with Earth's old ways. Some built metal, frames covered with mud bricks. Others used energy shields to protect against storms. Together they created a new kind of home, a blend of past and future. Eli watched their work and felt hope. In this distant world, a simple human idea had grown into something powerful. Was proof that no matter how advanced, sometimes the best tools are the oldest. And in this truth, humanity found its place, not just as a species with machines, but as one with wisdom to survive. The sun rose gently over Corel 4, casting warm light across the camp filled with new shelters. Mud walls glistened softly, their fiber strands holding strong. The strange mix of ancient earth building and alien materials made the place look both familiar and new. Eli stood near the center of the camp, watching the engineers work together. The laughter and chatter filled the air, a sound that had been missing since the first quake. Trevax approached, his heavy footsteps soft on the ground. His face, once marked by pride and stubbornness, now showed calm respect. "Human," Trevax said with a small smile, "you have done more than teach us to build shelters. You have taught us how to respect our world." Eli nodded. "That is the most important lesson. Buildings are not just things we make. They are part of the land and sky." The aliens gathered around, engineers who once laughed at Eli's mud, and fibers now proudly held their own bricks and tied their own ropes. Telly stepped forward. "We want to thank you, Eli. Without your help, many lives would have been lost." Eli smiled gently. "Thank you, but the credit belongs to all of you. You learned, you worked hard, and you changed." The camp buzzed with excitement. Plans were being made to rebuild the entire settlement. The new shelters would be stronger, safer, and better suited for Coral 4's unpredictable nature. The alien engineers studied the new designs, mixing their technology with human methods. Some added thin energy shields that could protect mud walls from heavy rain. Others experimented with lightweight metals to support the flexible frames. Children ran between the shelters, their faces bright with hope. They played safely before they had feared the Earth's fury. At night, the engineers gathered around small fires. They shared stories of Earth, of aliens, of the day the humans showed them a new way. Trevax raised his cup of clear liquid and spoke. To Eli, the teacher from Earth, to new beginnings. The crowd cheered. Eli felt a deep peace. For years, humans had been seen as simple or weak in the galaxy. But here, on this small planet, his people's oldest knowledge had saved many. It was a reminder that strength was not only in machines or weapons. True strength was in wisdom, patience, and respect. Days turned to weeks, and the camp transformed. The old shelters were replaced by strong domes built with mud, fiber, and a little alien technology. Trade ships arrived, amazed to see the new style of building. Word spread to other colonies and planets. Aliens came to learn the Earth method. Eli trained new teachers so the knowledge could spread. One day, as Eli prepared to leave Corel 4, Trivax came to see him. "You saved our people," Trivax said, "and you changed how we see humans. Will you return someday?" Eli smiled. "Maybe, but now, it's your turn to teach others." Trivax nodded. "We will honor your lessons. We will build not just with tools, but with respect." As Eli boarded his ship, he looked back at the camp, domes standing proud and strong beneath the alien stars. He knew Earth's old ways had found a new home, and in that simple truth, humanity's place in the galaxy was stronger than ever.